right, here we go. Welcome to VVCU, our sponsored event. We welcome Ahsha Safai. Is that how you say it? Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here, sir. Supervisor who is running for mayor of San Francisco. We are grateful that we have an audience today on this Wednesday, and also we have people online. Uh, we at BVCU are a group of community leaders, stakeholders who come together to give voice to Visitation Valley because the area has been neglected for so long. We help people to organize and find solutions to various issues and then bring them forward to policymakers and power brokers. So that's VBCU, and we're grateful that you're here today. Um, so we just have some questions. I want you to know before we get started that these are genuine questions. There's nothing. There's no sense of I'm trying to get you or back you into a corner or anything like that. Just really want to understand. Me personally, I've not decided who I'm going to vote for, and so I'm actually using these sessions to ask the questions that are on my mind, as well as Visitation Valley, to figure out who I'm going to cast my vote for. So this is all real, nothing for show. I'm going to ask the audience, please do not applaud, just for the sake of the video. I'm going to ask you, Supervisor, not to refer negatively to any of the other candidates. The questions will really refer to what you're planning to do. Asking everyone, please turn off your phones or put them on silent so they don't interrupt, and give you a few minutes to make an open statement if you would like.
Sure. Great. Can you all hear me? Is this microphone? Can you hear me now?
There you go.
All right, great. Let me just start by saying God is good. That's right. So for me, this is almost a little bit of a homecoming. So I started my career in this neighborhood 24 years ago, right up the street, working in the housing authority. And I like to tease Mayor Willie Brown, because I tell him, I said, I'm the first one in this city that named something after you. So you walk up the street there and you see the Mayor Willie L. Brown Youth Center. That was my project. So I worked on that for 2 years, making sure that our young people in this community would have a safe place, because there was a lot of violence going on, a lot of murders, the up the hill versus down the hill. There were days that I was out there that they said, Ahsha, you got to get in the back. It's about to set off. And it did. But we created a recording studio. We built refurbished a child care center. And I feel like we contributed to saving lives. And so that was how my career started in this city. And it has guided me for the last 24 years. I have always fought for those that are less fortunate and don't have the same resources and access that many people do. I came to this country when I was 6 years old, fleeing violence. I had family members that were killed. I was raised by a single mom. So and one thing you know about kids that are immigrants and that are raised by single moms, you know they fight. And I have fought for the underdog every step of the way, my entire career. I had the great fortune of meeting a young woman that I would end up marrying and moving to her hometown. Had to switch my allegiance on football teams, so just understand we're a 100% 49ers household, okay? There were a lot of tears in my house over the last few years, actually, as you all know if you're a Niners fan. But she was raised on that, and that was our first conversation when we met in school. So I've been here for 24 years, worked for Mayor Willie Brown, for Mayor Gavin Newsom, was a deputy department head for community development, worked in public works out there cleaning and greening, putting young people to work, and then ran for office, didn't win, which was a blessing. We can say blessing in here, right?
You can.
Okay, I just want to be clear. I'm just kidding. It was a blessing because I started my own family. Had my daughter, who just turned 14 a little while ago. and my son, who's now 12. And it teaches you humility when you don't succeed, but you got to keep trying. And I started my own small business. I worked with organized labor after that. And then I ran for office again in 2016 and won. So I've been on the board representing Lakeview, OMI, Excelsior for the past 8 years. And as I said, I've been fighting for working people and those less fortunate my entire career. So I appreciate you all giving me the opportunity to come here today. Every time I drive by Sunnydale, I have a lot of fond memories for the work that I've done and for a lot of the families that I've worked with over the years. So thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to having a good conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Let me ask, with whom did you work when you were doing that Willie Brown Center work?
So I worked with the Housing Authority. I was on the staff
Okay.
with the Housing Authority, but I worked with Kim Mitchell and Turf. So I made sure that they had, I don't know if Turf's still around, but they were a nonprofit working with young people. They worked with the Junior 49ers. They did, Pop Warner. They were helping young people. I worked with this woman named Sharon Hewitt, who passed away a few years ago, who did a lot of work in this community with families. And but I was on the staff at the Housing Authority.
Got it. All right, thank you.
And the executive director at the time was Ronnie Davis, and then Greg Fortner.
All right, so let's talk about safety first. In Visitacion Valley, there's a sharp divide in terms of how to deal with safety in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, a few years ago, there was the pendulum swung against mass incarceration, and the judicial system saw the errors of their ways in terms of black folks, and now the pendulum is swung the other way. And it is evident here in Visitacion Valley. So my question is, how will you address crime, and particularly how it impacts Visitacion Valley?
So I go back to that time when we built the youth center. Part of what we were doing there was trying to do intervention work. I think you have to think about, when you're talking about public safety, you have to think about it in a real holistic approach. Yes, everyone wants to be safe, but a lot of people that are not coming from communities of color, particularly black and brown, they don't know what it feels like to be over policed and to be targeted and profiled. And so we have to have that right balance. And so for the intervention programs, you got to make sure that we're targeting particularly youth in the middle school ages. That's when a lot of kids veer off track. Of course, you got to do the early childhood, but you got to really dig in. And I've done a lot of that in my career. I work with an organization called the Algebra Project and the Young People's Project before I went to school. And the work that I did with community development and public works, when I worked at Public Works, we created a program. It was called the 9916 program. And it was really about giving formerly incarcerated and young people an opportunity to get themselves a job and get their lives on track or back on track. And when a lot of people don't think about that as a part of how we're going to stem violence, because it's really interesting. The least, you start to see a decrease in funding of those programs, crime starts to go back up. And so that's an important piece of my plan. If you look at my website, ahshaformayor.com, you'll see we released a plan. The other thing is...
Before you go to the other thing...
because this is about violence.
Hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
Because on your website, it doesn't say anything about the middle school.
It does. I edited it myself. It's in there.
Oh,
it's one of the bullets.
Must have missed it.
Yeah. So, no, it's one of the bullets. It's one of the pieces of that. But intervention programs, targeting middle school, thinking about how we're funding. And what I was going to say, most recently, this is not a dig, this is just fact, okay? I'm not disparaging anyone. But in our most recent budget, when the mayor proposed her budget, she cut $25 million from Department of Children, Youth, and Family. And I helped to lead that effort to fight back on that, because a lot of those programs were young, inner city youth. They were young community developer. They were all of these intervention, after school, employment and training opportunities, which are super important. And I think that's on there. The other thing that I was going to say, a piece of that, is I put out a plan. I passed legislation for proactive community policing, getting officers out of their cars and on the foot beat and interacting in a proactive way with the community and building trust and engagement. And we've gotten away from that. You know, the chief came, what day is it today? Wednesday, just yesterday, to the board. They had an annual presentation and they talked about community policing. And I didn't want to get into a big argument and debate, but I wanted to say, where's it happening?
Yeah.
Because I'm not seeing it. I've been fighting for 7 years in our district to get officers out there doing proactive community policing. So they have a lot of words on the page, but not a lot of action out in the street. And I think that's super, super important. And the reason I say that is because all the way going back to when I was an undergrad, I had the opportunity to interview and work with Chief Bill Bratton in Boston, who then went on to New York and Los Angeles and other places. And he was the architect in many ways of real proactive community policing. So it has to be an and, not an or. You got to have officers, but you can't have them just coming in over policing. You got to have them engaging proactively and building trust. And I think we've gotten away from that. And then on the same vein, you got to do things like the 9916 program, the work that I did at Public Works, and some of the other intervention employment training programs that keep kids either on track or if they've been incarcerated, giving them that opportunity when they come.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because the resistance to community policing, actually doing it, is systemic. I mean, it's deep.
I know.
In the police department. And they're, unfortunately, even the new recruits are getting the same kind of feel from the older crowd. So my question is, what would you do differently to try to change the culture? Because it's steeped. And they're willing for community groups to do things, but in terms of personally being involved in actually what you're talking about, it's a lot of resistance. So what would you do differently to actually make it reality?
So again, I kind of fall back on my work with organized labor. A lot of times these groups, it's a give and a take. So we're in the process of negotiating, trying to stem the decrease in numbers by incentives. So I think what you do is when you're offering incentives and you sit down, as mayor, it's incumbent upon the mayor to sit down with the leadership of the different unions, particularly in this case, the police officers union, but also the department itself and the police commission, and saying, we're going to have a change in culture and philosophy here, but it's kind of a carrot and a stick situation. And that's what I have found to be the most successful. So that's how I would lead. And if you look at my track record, if you look at the things that I've done over the years, the work that I've done with labor, but also getting people to the table to build consensus, is a hallmark of my career.
Okay. All right. So I saw on your website this phrase, organized retail crime working group.
Yeah.
And so what is it, and does it exist today?
So when the beginning of COVID, we started to see a real uptick in people going into stores all over San Francisco and just taking with impunity, with no consequences.
The smash and grabs.
Not even smash and grab. They would just go into Walgreens and fill a bag, and you're like, okay, I'm leaving. I'm not paying. Peace. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. So when we saw that, when I say we, I mean me and my staff. In fact, my staffer and I went to the Walgreens on Geneva because we had kept seeing it online. Is this really happening, right? Is this just people trying to disparage and make San Francisco look bad? So we went down to the Walgreens. We were going to go talk to the manager. And while we were there, 10 young men walked by. And I said, this isn't going to happen while we're standing there. And sure enough, one stood outside like it was a bank robbery. They went in. They filled their bags. They didn't run. They didn't try to cover their face. I don't even think they had masks on. And they were kind of high-fiving. And they're like, all right, let's go. So, stores can only sustain that for so long. That doesn't make people feel safe. I don't care if it's a Walgreens or if it's a mom and pop shop. They start to lose too much money, they're going to shut down. And that's exactly what happened on Ocean and Mission. They shut the Walgreens down. And we can sit here and argue all day about whether it's online, shame people buying stuff online or not. But let me tell you something. When those things happen and people take videos of it and people see that around the world, people see that around the Bay, they're like, I'm not coming to shop in San Francisco. And that also drives sales down and it impacts. So we got the chief of police, the sheriff, the NAACP, Reverend Amos Brown, United Food and Commercial Workers Union, the district attorney. We got everyone together at the table and said, what can we do to stop this? We need to stop this. And so that work group did work together. And when it plays out on the street. A lot of times, my headquarters is at 22nd and Mission. You go there any time of day, you'll see people selling items on the street that they've stolen from the stores all over. They're just sitting there. They say Walgreens, Safeway, Apple. You can get sneakers. I'm sitting in there making fundraising calls, and someone ran out of Skechers with 5 boxes of shoes. I mean, this is really happening. So if we don't stop that, a lot of these businesses will shut down, and it impacts the image of our city. So we got on front of it. We passed legislation to make it illegal to sell items on the street. Even though it already was, we had to be able to crack down on it. We work with the sheriffs because a lot of businesses want to hire off-duty officers and or sheriffs to protect their stores. So we passed legislation for that. And then lastly, we work with the governor. Now, he used to be the mayor. I used to work for him. They put out grants, and so they have the license plate reader cameras that we applied for and some additional resources for the district attorney's office.
Okay.
So that was what that was about, and I feel like it was very effective. But we didn't want to be targeting people, but we wanted to target the stores where it was happening. And if you were stealing, there was going to be consequences.
Right. So to what extent would that, it sounds like that group disbanded.
It didn't really disband, but we accomplished the 3 things that we were looking for.
Yeah.
The most recent one was getting the money for the 400 cameras to be installed all over the city. And also the district attorney was able to get additional resources for prosecution. And then we passed a legislation for sheriffs and the illegal street fencing, where people are taking items. 2 years ago, 2 blocks from my house, they raided someone's house. They had turned their bedroom into a mini Walgreens. They were selling over-the-counter drugs and over-the-counter cosmetics. $3 million worth of sales on Amazon Marketplace and online. That's why we say organized, because what they'll do is they'll get people that have addiction. They'll get people that might have been in and out of jail, and they'll say, here's your list. This is what we want. Go get these. And then it ends up on. So it's a whole effort. It's something that when I came into office, that's not something that I was focused on building community, building affordable housing, working with. I didn't know anything about that, but it's something when you get elected, you have to respond sometimes to what's happening. And this was something that was really, really happening in a bad way. And so now, that's why you see a lot more officers in Union Square. And they'll catch you and arrest you if you're out there stealing.
So let's talk about the cameras, because you just brought them up.
Yeah.
Cameras are everywhere. It's like Big Brother. My question is, really, we live in a world where privacy is like a distant memory. But how do you balance privacy rights with safety? Because these cameras are becoming ubiquitous.
So these cameras are specifically to read license plates. So they're not going after people's face. They're not trying to ID people in that regard. They're going after, they're specifically for car and license plate readers. So I think that's the right balance. The other thing, too, we created a process that if people want surveillance technology or any kind of camera technology, there's a process you have to go through at the board and the city to get approvals for it. And so we tried to put safeguards in place because we don't want people being racially profiled, and we want to be able to control for that.
So the license plate readers, because of what I found out, my experience is, since they implemented them, awful lot of cars are getting towed. So
that's news. I didn't know about that.
all right, yeah. So all right. So here's my question is, the license plate readers, they just, and this is a question because I don't know the answer. They just go up and down the streets.
No, they're in strategic locations at intersections. So they might be on a city pole, and they're designed to look for cars that are coming in and out of intersections. And so if you have people coming into the city, they might be in an area where they're catching, they're looking you coming in. And if there's a crime committed and they're coming out, then there's a way for that technology to coordinate and work together.
Oh, so it's not on the meter maids don't have them as they go up and down the
I mean,
street.
they might, like the muni buses have cameras on them. If you're parked in there, the stop, they can the driver can take a photograph of your license and send. There's different ones. These are
That's
designed specifically to be mounted at intersections to be able to look for people that are involved in crime.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Your website refers to United Players and Roadmap of Peace.
That was one of the intervention. It was just as an example, yes.
Okay. So my question is, what are they, and what work did you do with both of those organizations?
So United Players is a group in South of Market that does a lot of gun buyback work. Every single person that works for them was formerly incarcerated. Oftentimes, some of the people have done life sentences, and they come out and they give them an opportunity for work. And they do a lot of good intervention work. And the Roadmap for Peace was...
Tell us what you did with United Players.
Oh, just having been the Deputy Director of Community Development, we worked to make sure they got funding.
Okay.
And then same as a member of the Board of Supervisors on the Budget Committee and others, we worked to ensure that that's an organization that was funded and uplifted. They ended up doing a major capital campaign, and the city helped them buy their building there in South of Market. Okay. And then Roadmap for Peace is street violence intervention program, was work designed to do intervention. And again, as a member of the board, we help to fund their work. So I use them as examples on as work that I would continue. Not saying that those are the only two that I'm going to work with, but work like that we've done in the past.
Okay. I thought from the website it sounded like you actually were personally involved in the work that they were doing, but now I do understand what you're saying.
Well, we'll have to go back and look at that and make sure it's clear, because I don't want anyone thinking I'm taking credit for anything that I wasn't involved in.
All right, so I understand that you opened a sober living facility.
Yeah.
All right. How was it funded? And tell us about it.
So when we were looking at the data as a member of the board, I asked departments to give us data. This is probably not going to come as a surprise to a lot of people, but 70% of the people that were involved in recommitting crimes had an underlying addiction. So if you don't deal with that addiction, oftentimes you're going to continue to get people that are continuing to commit crimes. So as a member of the board, I looked to work with the adult probation department, and they had a model that they said, if we can work with a community-based group, because a lot of folks that were with Black-led organizations and those that were with Latino-led organizations were specifically saying, we want to create more housing or more opportunities where we can be that are drug-free. And so we saw that model, and I was able to get funding in the budget a few years ago.
From the city?
Yeah, so I led the effort to work with adult probation and the public defender and the district attorney as a way to It could be an opportunity where people are coming out of jail, have them transition. So this is former addicts leading the recovery of current addicts. So either people coming out of jail that could be diverted into, or people that might have been rearrested and saying, we're going to give you this opportunity in this environment. A few years have gone by now and has been, very successful. And it's helped to change the debate because there's been a lot of conversation in the city over time that's saying, and this is making it simple, but a lot of people are saying, give people drugs that have a drug addiction to get off of drugs. And a lot of people need that help. But then some people are saying, I want to just be in an environment without drugs and not be triggered and try to help my life back on track. So we were trying to give them a new option. Yeah. And so since then, from those 80 beds, we've done there's been about 300 or 400 done in the city now, because we've expanded that model to a number of different locations. Some where it's only women that were former addicts leading the recovery of current addicts that are only women. So the Billie Holiday House, we did that. There was another one that people were suffering from severe mental health and drug addiction. So we did a partnership on that. So it set off a trend, and that's something that I would advance and expand as mayor for sure.
And so would you put a house like that in Visitacion Valley?
The way that we did it.
Or is there one already?
I don't know the answer to that. There might be a halfway house, but not like the one I'm referring to.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think every neighborhood in the city needs to share in the responsibility of all of the things that are going on. But I also feel deeply that when you're doing different models, you have to work with community and build community support. And so that's what I did in my district when we did safe parking for those that were living in vehicles that were unhoused. We put together a community-led group. We were in a room just like this. It was about the same amount of people. And we all voted whether we were going to go forward with it or not. And everyone decided to do that. And then with a set of expectations and requirements on the city's behalf. And then we brought the city in and got those agreements. I feel really deeply about that. Like, you can't come and force things, but I also feel like you got to balance it out. Everything can't just be concentrated in the Tenderloin either, right? So you got to make sure that we're balancing those things out across the city. In terms of would we put one here, I don't know if there's a need for it or if there's any space for it. This was an 80-unit apartment building.
Yeah.
Right? So
let me ask about you're bringing this up about community input, and now I'm wondering about marijuana, because they want to put one on every street corner in this valley. So my question is, where are you in terms of these stores, and just how your policy would impact the Visitacion Valley?
So when I first got elected, and even before that, I helped to stop 7 of them coming into my neighborhood. There was about 7 of them that wanted to open up in the Excelsior Outer Mission, but the community was 100% against them. Over time, the laws have changed, and we have 3 in our district, with a couple more that were planning to come in, but they didn't get the money, so it kind of fell through. So the economy kind of put those on hold. 3 more were coming in. So I try to have a balanced approach. One of the things I think is they shouldn't all be concentrated in one neighborhood. You'd be surprised to learn, though, I think the neighborhood that has the most is District 3. So over in North Beach, Fisherman's Wharf, downtown area. So they have the most. The Mission is second to that, and South of Market. Those are the 3 areas. A lot of it has to do with the zoning requirements. So if you have a commercial corridor, like you guys have Leland, right? So it's a little pocket. But Mission Street, imagine, runs from Daly City all the way down to so if you look at Mission Street, that's where that's where they most are. But I think, again, you have to kind of spread them out. And I actually passed a law a year and a half ago that said we shouldn't have any more applications right now. We have enough in the city. Let's let the economy adjust. And the economy's been doing that.
So how long will that last?
I think it was I can't remember, Lauren. Oh, it was a 5-year moratorium? Yeah, it was a 5-year moratorium.
So that's over the whole city right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So new applications. If you were in the pipeline,
right.
But again, I think the way that the market is kind of taking care of itself, that's why I think there's 3 that have been approved in my district, but they can't open up because I don't think there's demand for it. And the amount of revenue and the amount of taxes and all those things has been a little bit burdensome for that industry.
All right, so mental health, we've kind of walked into it a little bit. Let me ask you, or remind you, you may remember back in November of 2022, the guy at 7-Eleven who beat up a few people and then killed somebody, beat them to death, having a mental health crisis. So my question is...
Just sending my wife. She asked me for a telephone number. I apologize. I'm listening. Go ahead.
Just want to know how you will handle mental, because we have people wandering around right now suffering mental health crises. How would you handle that? How will you handle it if you become mayor?
I'm just going to send this to my wife because she's having a little bit of issue real quick getting into the house. I apologize.
Well, marriage is important.
There you go. Happy wife, happy life. Sorry about that. So I fundamentally believe we've missed an opportunity. And again, this is not disparaging anybody, but we've missed an opportunity over the last 4 or 5 years because we created a program at the board called Mental Health SF. Okay, it was a big negotiation with the mayor. It has never been fully funded.
How much is fully funded?
The idea is to create a 24-hour drop-in center where people are having mental health crisis. That's never been fully staffed. Creating the right amount of mental health professionals and technicians, and we've taken a step towards that. But when people, a lot of what you see out on the streets are both significant drug addiction and mental health crisis. The other thing too is we have a real opportunity now that St. Mary's and St. Francis were purchased by UCSF, because both of those hospitals have a significant capacity that we can expand to increase more beds. So that absolutely has to happen, and in my administration we would do. And then lastly, we just passed Proposition 1. Proposition 1 was a tax statewide on people that are millionaires. And so we said, let's take some of that money, let's repurpose it, and let's expand the number of mental health beds that we need in the state. So some of it might require us to get into contract, and we do, which again is something that I've learned as being a member of the board. We sign contracts far out of county because we don't have the right amount of beds in our city, and we don't have the capacity in our city. Because we went statewide from 21,000 mental health recovery beds down to 18,000. And some of them are smaller group homes in community. There were single family homes that might have been turned into, some people call it a halfway house, but it's more of a recovery house in community. So we have those around the city. We have them in District 11. We have them in District 10. We have them, there are probably some here in Viz Valley. And as the market has gotten so expensive, people are like, well, I don't need to keep this house as this anymore. I can sell it to someone else, and now this house is worth $1.5 million, $2 million. I don't want to be in this business anymore. So a lot of the community-based opportunities have gone down, while at the same time, some of our hospital-based or institutional-based. So that's what Prop 1 was about. So we need to be first in line for those dollars and look to expand capacity all over the state. So those are the things that I would do aggressively. Implement mental health SF, make it a priority, get the partnership with UCSF for St. Mary's, St. Francis, expand and look for the opportunities in Prop 1 dollars to get additional beds and the recovery beds. And then the other thing which overlaps with the street homelessness is a lot of times people that are having mental health and drug addiction issues really need non-congregate, non-shelter space, but individual kind of private space. So like the tiny homes, getting them to stabilize them in those environments and then getting the services on site. So I would do all of those things.
Okay, so you said SF mental health?
Mental health SF.
SF, yeah.
Mental health SF.
So would there be, if you fully funded it, first of all, how much is fully funded?
Well, it's phases. It's phases. It's in the multi-millions of dollars, but some of it could be redirecting some of our existing funding in the Department of Public Health.
And so would there be silos?
It's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay.
Sure.
It would be silos?
I like to think of it as pieces, like pieces of a puzzle. So if you have people that are on crisis, some of which I saw today, walking down the street, talking to themselves, sometimes they're not harming anyone, but sometimes they're harming themselves and others. Mental Health SF is a 24-hour site. To have that fully staffed, you need mental health.
Is one site or is
it's a one site, and then there's community-based clinics, and I think that's one of the things that you see on my website talking about. That would be another piece of it, kind of a network of care and providers.
So in your plan, would there be one of those sites in Visitacion Valley?
I don't know if you have a community health clinic here. I mean, some of it is building on, so there's one over in Portola on Silver. Yeah. There's over in the Fillmore.
Oh, this would be a part of those.
Yeah, okay. Kind of building on top of them, building on top of the existing network. But if there's additional infrastructure that's needed, but the site, I think the way it was envisioned would be on SF General's campus.
Okay. All right. Now we're going to go to business development.
Are we also going to do questions from the audience, or are this also questions from the audience?
We are the last 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Well, the issue, of course, is we have a 7:15. So we're pressed, but we'll see what happens.
No, okay.
All right. So
I mean, I'm good. I just wanted to be respectful of that. That's all.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. So you're familiar with Leland, and you know that there are a lot of storefronts that are vacant, and people wandering around, and it's really underdeveloped. So my question is, if you're elected, what would you do to help Leland?
So I like to think of exactly, it's similar to what's happening in the Excelsior and Outer Mission. Try to tell my colleagues, if you haven't been to Excelsior, south of Persia, you don't understand what true economic depression is, and empty storefronts and lack of investment. So we created what's called a community benefits district, where the property owners pool their resources so they can do and ensure that places are clean and safe, but also do business attraction and investment. We just got that passed. It took, we had COVID and the economic downturn, all that, but we got that passed. That's a model to look at for Leland in this area. Another thing that we did is we utilize grants and opportunities to give people that are trying to start their businesses small grants so they could do pop-up in existing spaces. We work with some of the arts organizations to do that, and now that has been helpful in activating space. And then, obviously we had the vacancy tax. It's not clear whether or not it's been fully implemented and supported, so that some of the people that have these empty spaces, they need to be motivated to rent their spaces rather than sit on them.
Okay, so
all of that would be I would do all of those things for Leland and Diz Valley.
Okay, all right. And so these are things that you're already doing in your district, and that
we've been trying for 7 years, right? And we just have been getting more of that off the ground. I would say one of the things that's been discouraging is there's been a lot of focus and investment on Union Square in the downtown, and not disparaging, but we need to make sure that whoever the next mayor is, and I'm committing to that there's the same level of focus and attention given to the neighborhoods.
Okay, so let's talk about that then. Reallocation of resources. How would you change the allocation of resources, services to Visitation Valley?
So similar to what I just said. Yeah. So,
Okay.
I mean, if you have an Office of Economic and Workforce Development, and that office has millions of dollars, and they're doing a vacancy to vibrant program for 15 storefronts in the downtown, I would do some of the same things for neighborhoods like Viz Valley or the Excelsior, others that have really high rates of vacancy in storefronts. I give small business grants to people that are ready to start a business in Viz Valley. I would give them the support for pop-ups and startups. I would give them also the other thing that a lot of people want to make sure is that it's safe. So go back to like having in our neighborhood, one of the things that really made a difference was having ambassadors out there, not police, but people that would work with a group called Urban Alchemy. And so they're out there on the streets cleaning, talking to business owners, making sure that they're out there making the neighborhood more vibrant and safe. And so that has had a major impact on the neighborhood.
Okay. All right. I'm going to who's about to ask Jessica? Fantastic. Yep. So Jessica's going to come and ask some questions from the audience.
Hi, Supervisor.
Hey.
So we have some questions from the audience, and I'm just going to read them out, and then you can respond as you would like.
She has some more for you.
Great. So, did you support Prop 47, and how do you feel about it now with the negative publicity and the fact that people are purposely going under the limit to go back later to steal more?
So Prop 47 was before my time. I was not an elected official at that time, and I wasn't really involved in that. But what I will tell you is there's a little bit of misinformation about that measure. And kind of going back to your question, Reverend, you talk about over-incarceration. There was a lawsuit brought against the state of California for cruel and inhumane treatment of prisoners, overcrowding of prisons, and incarcerating people for nonviolent offenses. And the state of California lost that. So part of what Prop 47 was about looking at low-level crimes and offenses and saying, is this really necessary to be part of a 3-strike felony case? The other thing, too, to note is $950 is still, in the state of Texas, it's even, it's less, right? It's not even, but the difference is the prosecution, and that's when I go back to what we did with organized retail theft, where we gave additional resources to the district attorney. So it was before my time, so I wasn't involved in it. And I know there's an effort to try and reform it. I'm not clear exactly which one made the ballot, but I will say we got to be really careful because that pendulum swinging, you're going to see a lot of people being incarcerated. I do want to stop retail theft. I do want to make sure that people that are committing the same crime over and over again are held accountable, but I don't want to see the prisons just clogged up again like they were.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on keeping or firing certain department heads?
So, no, that's an easy one for me because I was the first one out the gate. Head of the MTA will be gone. Head of public health will be gone. And I say this lovingly, but the chief of police has been there longer than any chief for 50 years in our city. And I think we need some change there as well, particularly going back to the issue on community policing and fully engaging on that. Chief Scott has done a tremendous job, and he really was involved in what we were doing, which was changing the culture of violence towards people, officer-involved shootings, over-policing. And there were 272 recommendations, but there were really more like, you got to do this from the Department of Justice. And we've met every single one of them. So I give tremendous kudos to the chief. But I think just for a culture shift, not anything about him personally, I think we would need a new chief as well.
Thank you.
And I could keep going, by the way. There's going to be a wholesale change under my administration. Those are the ones that jump to mind.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. Yesterday, the Board of Supervisors voted to turn Stonestown parking into housing. If elected, what is your plan to address parking needs in the city, as well as your plan to ensure that the housing built is affordable for those who work in San Francisco?
So I looked at if you look at my district, and there was no housing built in my district in 50, 60 years on that scale. And we've done over 600 units of housing, but 65% of it is affordable. And we expanded the definition of affordable to also include janitors, teachers, laborers, carpenters, security guards, people that made a little bit too much to qualify for affordable housing, but not enough to make it for market rate. So we were able to expand that definition in a healthy way, but not at the cost of any of the low income, right? So we expanded that definition. That's something that I would do. The other thing that we did is we made sure that we balanced out parking, in a way that even the planning department didn't necessarily want. Because I was with someone that's running for office in my district today to try to replace me. She's like, I knocked on a whole bunch of doors and all people want to talk about is parking. And I was like, I told you. District 11 is different. The farther you get from downtown, the more people want to talk about different issues. And so I think you got to balance it out. Although in the Stonestown plan, they're going to rebuild the parking and parking structures and underground, because you can't have a mall without parking. So that's just not feasible. You have to have places for people to park if you want them to come shop on that scale. And it's a regional and a citywide draw. But there's $50 million of improvements to public transportation in that plan as well. So we have to enhance and support and make better our public transportation overall.
Thank you. You spoke about the funding DCYF lost through Sunnydale as a part. Though Sunnydale is a part of District 10, residents often refer to it as District 10.5 because Bayview is the main focus. If elected now, will you ensure funding and programs such as college readiness and workforce development are properly dispersed and help all low-income neighborhoods?
Absolutely, 100%. So the second piece of that story was I fought on the board, I led the effort, and we got almost every single dollar restored to DCYF. And you heard what I said earlier. Don't tell Bayview, but I'm biased towards Sunnydale.
Thank you. If elected, how will you work productively with the current D10 supervisor?
Oh, Supervisor Walton and I have a great relationship. We partnered on a tremendous amount of things. We worked on a lot of work together, whether it was youth programming, violence intervention work, even co-hosting the hearing on discrimination and mistreatment of Black employees, public employees. He and I have worked on a tremendous amount of things together. And he sponsored a lot of the things that I've been a part of. And I don't think I have a stronger ally on the board, I would say.
Thank you. Would you support reparations for African Americans in San Francisco? And if so, how?
So I was on the budget committee. I voted to ensure that we got $4 million to start the process for reparations. And I was sad to see that the mayor chose not to use that money and implement and begin the process. And what I always tell people, and I think this is important, if you had a home or a business that the government took and you never got compensated for it, how would you feel? Because a lot of people can identify with that. Just make it as simple as possible. And we have not even documented that. There were thousands and thousands of people in our city that had their home taken for pennies on the dollar or their business taken for pennies on the dollar. And it is our obligation as a government to compensate them for that loss. And then not to mention all the families that were displaced during that time. So that would be a step that we would take.
Thank you. What will you do to deal with misuse of funds for homelessness programs?
So 18 months ago, I ran a charter amendment to bring in mandatory audits for the department that oversees homelessness. And when we started those audits last year and the audits began, One of the very first contractors, they had to call in the FBI because the group was selling vouchers to friends and family. Another contractor, they were submitting invoices to the city for work that they didn't even do. So I'm very much about accountability. It's actually one of the pillars that I'm running on. I want to make sure we root out corruption in City Hall, because 9 times out of 10, that money's intended for communities that need it the most. And by the way, that's not to say I've worked with nonprofits. There's tremendous nonprofits that have done tremendous work in this city, and we could not function as a city without the good work that many of the nonprofits do. Some of them I talked about earlier today on the youth intervention work. But when it comes to homelessness, we had a department that started out as $100 million. It's grown to over $700 million. And I think everyone in this room would say they don't think things have gotten better, they've gotten worse. So we need to make sure that we know where that money is going and how it's being spent, and is it being spent well and effectively.
Thank you. Last but not least, one of the questions is more personal. I need housing, and if I don't receive it anytime soon, I'll be forced to move out of the state with my daughter. Please help.
Wait, say that again? So you said someone needs housing? Oh, got it. Well, I mean, one of the things that I will tell you is we don't have direct control over providing people housing, but we do have, and we did create a program to help people with rental assistance. And we did create, and you all saw, and we planned, that's a question that I thought you were going to ask me, Reverend. I'm going to add on to it. I opened up the first, I wrote the legislation, and we opened up the first food empowerment market, which was designed for people that need assistance for food and groceries, that they can go and they can get that assistance, not go stand in line, not go get a box, but they can go into a store and they can shop with dignity. And so the plan is to expand those into multiple neighborhoods around the city. So if someone's having a hard time surviving and thriving in the city, helping them with food support, helping them with rental assistance, can do that. And that's something that I do have control over. In terms of getting them on a list or making sure that they get a house, we don't have control over that. But what we do have control over is making sure that they have support, which can help them. We do have preferences for people that are living in certain neighborhoods. So if they get on a list, they'll get an additional consideration if they go into a lottery. And that's something that we did pass at the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. All right, so our time is up, but I do want to say thank you and give you an opportunity to tell Visitation Valley what you want us to know that you have not already shared today.
Can I stand up?
Sure.
Great. Well, first I want to say thank you for having me here today. As I said when I first started talking, this is a real homecoming for me. As I said, I worked for 2 years up the street building that youth center. And I have a lot of respect for this community and a lot of pride. And I know the people in Sunnydale and Viz Valley feel like that 10.5 question, that's very similar to what I hear out in District 11, the Excelsior, Outer Mission. People feel like the farther away you get from downtown, the more you feel forgotten. And so, being the only immigrant in this race, being someone that worked for 2 mayors, Mayor Willie Brown, Mayor Gavin Newsom, was a deputy department head for community development, worked out on the streets cleaning and greening San Francisco for public works, getting people jobs and giving them opportunity to turn their lives around, running my own small business, working with the janitors union, and now being on the board for the last 7.5 years. I bring a real diverse set of experiences. There's a lot of activity in this room.
Yeah, just stand in the middle.
A lot of directors. Not one director. There's like 10 directors. I'm like looking at all 5, and hand signals, and anyway. But so that level of experience, I think, is really important, because this is not an entry-level job. you got to be ready for this job day one. And I have a lot of respect for the current mayor. She and I have done a lot of work over the years. But I can tell you from campaigning for over the last year plus, people want change in San Francisco. They want to see some new leadership, and they want to see a new direction. And that's not a knock on her. You know, I think that's a vibe that people are feeling in general. And so I come here humbly today. I hope you all will consider me. I hope you all will give me a good look. And even if you don't vote for me number one, you can vote for me number two, because you get more than one choice. And believe me, no one's winning on the first round. So every vote matters. So I appreciate the opportunity to come out here tonight. I will always fight for all San Franciscans. I want this city to remain a city for everyone, not just the extremely wealthy, multi-billionaires, people struggling to get by. We got to have working families. Everyone's got to be able to survive and thrive in this city. And that's what I've dedicated myself to over the last 24 years, fighting for communities of color, both black and brown, immigrant communities, working households, labor households. So I humbly ask for your support. Thank you, everyone.